Dr. Clark. ICT, please can you start the recording? Yep, sorted. Thank you to everyone for attending this hybrid meeting for the Overview and Scrutiny Task Group, Sustainable Public Transport, on Thursday the 3rd of December. We've got some members present in the Lancastrian, some joining from home, and members of the public are welcome to observe the meeting from Committee Room 1, where the meeting is being streamed. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Councillor Kim Snape and I'm chair of this committee. Please note this is a Teams meeting, it's being recorded and the video stream will also be uploaded to YouTube after the meeting. For each item, I'll invite members to use the raise hand function on your iPads to make any comments to ensure each member has the opportunity to speak and that they are not speaking over each other. Please also mute your microphone and video feed when you're not speaking, and if the technology fails, then I'll adjourn the meeting for a few minutes to try and resolve the issues, or if this is not possible, a new date and time will be organised. Please can I ask all members to confirm that they can hear and speak before the meeting begins. I'll call out each member. Julia Berry. No. She's not on the call, so we'll come back to that one. Martin Boardman. Another one.
Not doing very well.
Val Corns, that's in Val.
I'm here, yes, here, Chair.
Yeah, brilliant. Mark Clifford, I can see Mark.
Present, Chair.
Lovely. Gordon France.
I'm here, Chair.
Tom Gray.
I'm here, Chair.
Von Hargreaves.
I'm here, Chair, thank you.
Laura Lennox.
I'm here, Chair, thank you.
Brilliant. And June Molyneux.
Good evening, Chair.
Super. And welcome to, I think we've got Matt Davis, James Mellor and Nick Small from Stagecoach. And I think we've got Zoe Whiteside from Chorley Council as well. So thank you for attending. Right, we'll go on to apologies. Are there any apologies for the meeting?
There are no apologies, Chair.
No apologies. Lovely. So we'll go on to item 1, minutes of the meeting, Thursday the 5th of November. Are there any issues to raise on the accuracy of the minutes?
I'll move those, Chair.
June's moved those, so unless there's anybody that speaks or signals that they're against, then I'll take that the minutes are approved. Thank you. Item 2, declarations of any interests. Members are reminded of their responsibility to declare any pecuniary interest in respect of matters contained in the agenda. As this is a virtual meeting, if a member has a pecuniary interest, they're requested to leave the call completely rather than just mute the microphone. The member can then rejoin the call following the completion of the item in question. Are there any declarations of interest? No, so I'll take that as no, although we're all interested. Right, item 3, verbal update on the green agenda in relation to sustainable public transport. And we've got Zoe Whiteside, the spatial planning service lead from Chorley Council, who's going to provide us with a verbal update on the green agenda. Zoe, are you able to present your report?
I am, yes. Good evening. Thanks, Chair. Hi, everybody. Hi, members of the public. So just a quick update, really, in terms of the work that we're doing around the green agenda. I won't put my video on purely because we have poor Wi-Fi where I live. So if I put my video on, it become quite distorted. So I am here. I am here in person, but I will keep my video off just to maximise the connection. So in terms of the work that we're doing around this, as you'll know, Chorley declared a climate emergency in November 2019 as a council, and we committed to ensuring that as a borough, we would achieve net zero carbon by 2030. So quite a big commitment that we made. There was subsequently an overview and scrutiny task force set up, and that group reported a series of recommendations to Cabinet earlier this year, which were endorsed, and to form the climate change programme of actions. And as part of that, we were to commission work to develop a roadmap and action plan towards achieving this carbon neutrality by 2030, including targets, actions and measures. So I'm here really just to report briefly on the overall sort of programme, but then more specifically around transport. So generally, in terms of governance of that work programme, we're currently recruiting a climate change programme officer, and it's hoped that that person will be in post early in 2021. And that officer will play a key role really in driving forward this agenda and particularly delivering on that action plan. I think from memory, there's around 20 actions that we've committed to across all sectors and areas, not just transport, across all themes, biodiversity, energy, lots of things in there. And that person will be coordinating all of that work. And so it's quite crucial. It's quite a crucial role that in terms of ensuring that we achieve our goals really. So also a key person, the key role of that person really will be to ensure that we're maximising the best practice that we've got in the council, because it's such a moving feast, the green agenda, climate change, obviously Environment Act, all the reports that are coming out at the moment, the forthcoming summit that's coming up in terms of revisiting the commitments made in Paris, etc. We need a single point of access really for somebody that's navigating all of the kind of this agenda, the indicators, and also more importantly the access to grants, because there's lots of funding available to local authorities and to our partners for delivering on green related schemes, and we need a single person really to kind of coordinate all of that. So it's quite crucial, that person. And it is worth mentioning that it is a huge agenda, this, and requires significant shifts in behaviour across all partners, sectors and the community. So a key factor of the success really of the programme will be the engagement and influencing change. It's not something that Chorley Council officers can do or members can do on our own really. So worth mentioning that. Also, we are in the process of establishing a member working group for climate change. So this was, again, one of the recommendations that the task and finish group made in terms of going forward. So we've got a meeting next week on the 10th to discuss a way forward with the leader, deputy leader, portfolio holder for early intervention and the climate change champion, along with democratic services officers. So it's envisaged that that meeting next week will be to set out how we're going to, the structure of those meetings, the chair, the terms of reference, the frequency, and then set a date for the first meeting in the new year. It's envisaged that that will be fairly early on, January, February time. And again, that will be a crucial meeting going forward, because the way we see it is that the officers, particularly that climate change programme officer, will be reporting at all meetings progress on those actions, that programme, and also, most importantly, the targets that we've committed to. So in terms of specific activity around sustainable public transport, the specific actions arising from that task group and the suite of recommendations, I'll just go through some of those, include an investigation of renewable energy sources for the council, as well as sustainable transport options and air quality monitoring, and to develop and adopt a clean air strategy and action plan. So the update on this area of work is we have a draft clean air strategy, and we've changed the title because we felt that we would rather be a positive than a negative, and a clean air strategy sets out on the tin really what it's aiming to achieve. That strategy document is going to CLT, our corporate leadership team, next week, next Wednesday, and thereafter it'll go to leader brief and the portfolio for early intervention, and then on to exec cab for approval to consult. So it's envisaged that will go to cabinet probably February of the new year, and then it will be out in the public domain. And that's quite important really in terms of achieving those clean air targets and contributing to the overall goals really. I apologise if you can hear my dog barking. I am trying to, I've shut the door, but you might still be able to hear him. There's only me in the house unfortunately, so I can't attend to him, but hopefully he's not too loud. So that's the clean air strategy. I mentioned about renewable energy sources. This is going to be a task for the climate change officer to drive forward, working with the service leads, but also, most importantly, our Lancashire County Council colleagues. Obviously, they lead on as a transport authority, but there is a Lancashire-wide energy group, and we are aware that some of the bigger authorities in Lancashire are well advanced in this kind of area. So it'll be a key part of that role really to drive this agenda forward and to explore the options for Chorley, and also how we can bring in the investment to deliver a change. A second one was through the council's role as licensing authority to investigate and develop an action plan for electric or hybrid hackney carriage of private hire vehicles. Now, already the council has licensed 10 hybrid vehicles as private hire, but our policy only allows vehicles which comply to Euro 5 emission standards to be granted a new licence. Now, we are reviewing our taxi licensing policy this year, so more work will go into looking at the requirements around hybrids, electric vehicles. And as part of that, it's likely we will need to look at and map out where the charging points are, because obviously we can't require our licensed taxi drivers to use electric vehicles if there isn't the provision to ensure that they can charge them when they're doing their job, as it were. So that's going to be a piece of work going forward. That will be led by a service lead. It won't be the climate change officer's role to do that. That piece of work is something that we would do anyway, but obviously they'll have a role to play in that. A further action in that action plan was to establish a dialogue with Lancashire County Council to consider the opportunity for sustainable transport schemes, including a commercial model. Now, we have raised this with transport planners at the County Council, and they advise there is some work to be commissioned, which will be linked to something called a Greater Lancashire Plan. And that will look at how net carbon can be achieved across all of Lancashire, not just individual boroughs. It is a big piece of work and is expected to be published next summer. Now, obviously, we will feed into that. Spatial planning, my team will be part of that, but also I'd like to see the climate change officer around the table as well, and making sure that Chorley is well represented in that work, and we're maximising any opportunities that we have as a borough to introduce those as part of our offer to the public. The next one was to refresh the Central Lancashire Transport and Highways Master Plan. So this is a document that the county produce as the Highways Authority, but it's important for Chorley because it sets out the issues around transport, and most importantly the schemes or the investment that we need to support existing and future development and growth. Now, those of you members that are close to policy and planning in Chorley may recall that we have discussed this in our local plan working group, because the existing Central Lancashire Transport and Highways Master Plan is quite a city deal focused document. So the published master plan that we have at the moment is very geared towards Preston and South Ribble's infrastructure needs to accommodate city deal. Very few, if any, Chorley schemes on there. So Chorley Council have commissioned our own Chorley transport strategy, and the reason why we did that was to ensure that when as we move forward with the local plan, that we have a document that brings us on a level playing field with our Central Lancashire colleagues. So we do have that document. It's in draft form at the moment. It's not in the public domain because it's only a stage 1 scoping document. But when we have a stage 2, which will probably be next year sometime, once we've firmed up all the sites that potentially will go forward as part of our local plan, we will then start take shape. At the moment, it's just a long list of potential schemes based on all of the potential sites that we could take forward. As we whittle those down, it will become distilled into a real robust plan in terms of future infrastructure investment. But coupled with that, our colleagues at Lancashire County Council advise us that they will be doing a review of the Central Lancashire Highways and Transport Master Plan, which will look at Chorley and will include schemes for us going forward. But we have the Chorley one just as kind of just to ensure that we do have that document and that evidence base. If for any reason the county drag their heels and we get to a situation where we're at preferred options in plan making terms, and yet we don't have a requisite plan for transport. As part of that work, that heavily looks at active travel, walking and cycling, but also public transport as well. Now, I've looked this afternoon at the scoping paper that our transport consultants produce for Chorley. Now, they do note that there is limitations in terms of the provision of improved public transport for Chorley in terms of the offer. However, they did recommend that we consider rail, and we have looked at that. A piece of work has been done recently to look at Coppell Station in particular, working with our colleagues at West Lancs and South Ribble Council. So that is something that we can look at going forward as part of local plan. Obviously, it requires a huge amount of investment, but that is something that is on the table, as it were, that we have a piece of evidence there that we can look at and use depending on where the growth may be going forward as part of local plan. And those are all of the actions that were committed to as part of that work. Now, there will be lots of other streams that kind of touch on sustainable public transport. And like I mentioned about active travel, particularly cycling, because quite often commuters will cycle and bus or rail part of their journeys. And part of that is looking at, for example, cycling infrastructure. And that is something that the piece of work that I mentioned, the Chorley piece of work, certainly looks at. And it is something that as a council we've considered investing in going forward, either through SIL or through other investment opportunities. So I hope that's a summary of where we're up to at the moment. Obviously, a key part of that work will be this officer that will be hopefully in post January, February. We've had a lot of interest, so I'm quite excited that we'll get somebody that's got the expertise, but also the programme's management skills to pull together quite a huge area of projects really for delivery. And the key backstop will be that 2030 commitment that we've made. Happy to take questions, Chair.
Thank you very much, Zoe. That's really interesting. Are there any questions or comments? I think I saw. Was your hand up, Laura? Or no, I don't think it's up now. Are there any other questions? I've got Yvonne.
Hi, Zoe. It's Yvonne Hargreaves. Just a quickie. I mean, when you say we're looking at alternatives, are we looking at a peripheral of fuels when it comes to buses and the sort of transport we're looking for, i.e., you know, HVOs and hydrogen along with electric, and sort of there are different sort of liquefied natural gases, etc. I'm interested to know what we are looking at before, obviously, our guests speak.
I wouldn't say we've ruled anything out, that we've not even done any option appraisals on this work, and we would look to our Lancashire and County Council colleagues in terms of directing the direction of travel in terms of the best course of action, and also taking account of economies of scale and best practice. Because obviously we're a small district council, Lancashire as a whole will have a bigger footprint, and we'll have, you know, if there's benefits in economies of scale and sharing best practice, then obviously we would look at that. But we haven't really started this piece of work as yet, so it would be too early for me to rule one particular source of energy out of over another. We would essentially do an option appraisal, taking account of what other councils, and particularly the county council, are recommending. And obviously, you know, based on a business model and a case, and then look to bring that to members to make decisions on.
All right, thank you, Zoe.
Are there any other questions? Can't see anybody else's hand up, so Zoe must have answered everything.
Unusual.
No other questions.
Kim,
yeah.
Sorry, could I come in? I just want to congratulate Zoe and the work that officers have been doing around the transport plan, because I think it's really been a necessity really for us to step up and obviously get our own transport plan in place, because of the reluctance and the barriers associated with working with my county council colleagues who seem not really that very healthy in their approach, in that they're not having any formal conversations with any of the transport providers regarding Coppell railway station, and it's holding us back. So I'm glad that we've stepped up. It's a magnificent piece of work, and we just need to add to it, and hopefully, obviously in COVID, I think the transport plan at county has been delayed, but as soon as that's out for consultation, that we can all pile in literally and really talk up sort of resources for Chorley to make sure that we're future proof really and good for the environment at the same time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you want to come back on that, Zoe, or?
Just to say thank you. I mean, it is a huge area of work, and obviously we are as county council or the highways authority, then we are reliant on them. We do, my team, if you know Alison's on this call, this meeting, we do badger them, Julia, really do, you know, to get answers out of them in timescales, in terms of when they're going to begin particular pieces of work and publish them, etc. So you know, hopefully they're telling us now that they're starting the review of the Central Lancashire Master Plan, so we wait to see what that looks like.
Fab, thank you very much. Any other comments or questions? No, so I think we'll note Zoe's report and thank you very much, and we look forward to next year and seeing things progress even further. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good night.
Thanks for coming. Right, we'll go on to item 4. We've got a verbal presentation from Stagecoach. So I think we've got, or do you want to introduce yourself? So
yeah, okay. Do you want me to start? So
yeah, I mean, I think there's a number of questions that you're sort of going to run through, aren't there? And members have seen sight of those. So I don't know if you want to take, do you want to take one section at a time and then we can ask questions on those?
Give a quick introduction of who we are and what we're going to cover. And then, because we've got some slides with some of the questions in, and we can take questions as we go along, if you wish, by hands. And just before I introduce myself, the one thing I've learned is when I bring the presentation up on the screen, because we've got a presentation, I can't see everybody. So if there is a question, perhaps you could kindly point that to me and invite the question.
Yeah, we'll let you know.
Hello everybody, good evening. I'm Matt Davis, Managing Director of Stagecoach's operations in the South Lancashire area. I also cover Merseyside. With me tonight is James Mellor, our Commercial Director, and Nick Small from our UK team as well. And sorry, I didn't introduce Nick. Nick's the Head of Strategic Development and the Built Environment. We've got a little bit of a presentation, which I shall bring up onto the screen now. While I'm talking, so a bit of multitasking is always the challenge, right? Hopefully you will be able to see that. Has it come on?
Yeah, it's coming on.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So what I'm going to do is give you a little bit of introduction covering background to Stagecoach's operation in the Charlie Borough, and how we're doing at the moment in terms of customer satisfaction. We've then got several slides covering the questions that you've asked us to talk about. Now, we could talk about these all day and go really in depth, so we're going to have to watch the time. I've kept it to very simple sort of headline answers and detail, and I'm more than happy to expand on those as we go along, and I'm sure James is as well, and Nick. And then we've got a little bit of a section on sort of planning, because we'd really like to encourage you to think about the role of the bus in future planning decisions, and Nick is an absolute expert on our team with planning, so Nick's going to talk in a bit more detail about how developments can cater for buses and drive bus usage in the future. So just before I sort of start to talk through a little bit, obviously we're in a pandemic at the moment. The pandemic has really potentially reset the economics of bus operation and is a real challenge. So we went overnight from previous patronage levels to 10% of what we'd normally carry in March and April. And then it's got as high as about 55–60% of what we'd normally carry. And then it started going down again. This was before we had the second lockdown. So in the autumn, October, people were undoubtedly becoming more nervous about increasing infection rates in society. So patronage started to drop. In the lockdown, it's dropped again to 45%, which is much higher than before, and it's currently going back up again. But our estimates are that bus patronage will not recover to the level it was at prior to the lockdown. The best estimates are around 80%. The lowest ones are around 60%. The good news is the lowest ones are getting higher because we can do 60 now. So some of the time, so it is getting a little bit better, but we're not going to be able to go back without your support to the way we were. And your support will mean pro-bus policies, maybe car parking strategies, bus priority, things that help drive growth. And we'll talk a little bit more about those. The fundamentals that are changing are things in society that are happening and been going on for a long time. The decline of the high street, the switch to internet shopping, increased home working, rising car ownership. They all affect bus patronage, People need to have a need to travel and want to travel with us. So if the need for travel is changing, that automatically reduces demand. And typically the bus industry's had decline of 2 to 3% every year for a number of years now, and we've seen car ownership rise considerably. And one of the issues that's been encouraged by that is successive government policy to freeze fuel duty on petrol at the pumps. Prices at the pumps are 13% lower than they otherwise would be, and that's fueled increased car ownership, and that's really impacted us. All that's a bit negative, and there are many positives and there are some opportunities. And one of them is that if we could get 1% of motorist journeys to use the bus, that would be a 10% patronage increase. So what I'll do now is I'll pass you on to James, and we'll just tell you a little bit about our Chorley area operations.
Hi, good evening. Yeah, we'll just give you a quick overview, just very briefly before we come into the questions. As to some of you will know some of this already and may hopefully use some of these services, but effectively in our South Lancashire operations, we have our main depot site at Preston, but we do have a smaller facility, an outstation as we call it, in Chorley, which has got 25 buses and around 70 employees, mostly drivers, but there are also some cleaning staff and engineers there as well. Route network. Biggest route we've got is the 125, as I'm sure many of you see in Chorley, linking Bolton, Chorley, Preston, and now the Royal Preston Hospital, which has been a recent route extension. That's not just only one of our busiest routes in our local company, but also in Lancashire. It's a really high profile, important route. It's got operated with high specification buses. As I say, it's recently been extended to the Royal Preston Hospital at the northern end as well. But we also run other routes around Chorley. We have the 109, which is the main link to places like Exton and Buckshaw Village and on to Leyland and Preston. We do the 8A, which only 2 or 3 trips a day, but it is quite vital, providing shopping links for places like Limbrick and Anderton, Lower Adlington and on to Blackrod. And outside the town itself, our other main route in the borough that passes through is the Wigan, Wrightington, Eccleston, Leyland, Preston service. We also do a few other sort of evening and Sunday contracts on behalf of Lancashire County Council that are provided by other bus operators during the daytime. Just go on to the next slide, Matt. Yeah, just a couple of maps there. I mean, you probably can't pick out a lot of the detail on your screen, but one is an overview where it just gives a brief view of our longer distance network in Lancashire. And the other map is just a more sort of localised view of Chorley. But as I say, the main route is the 125 through the town. And then just very briefly, in terms of customer satisfaction, it's not all bad news. Pre-pandemic, we had and still have now very, very high levels of operated mileage. So 99.9% of our scheduled mileage is operated. And the bit that's not operated is effectively things like breakdowns and so on, which thankfully are few and far between. And 92.9% of our journeys start on time. In terms of ticketing offer, there's quite a wide range of tickets, but the key ones at the moment, we offer day and weekly and longer duration tickets, which sort of cover the whole central Lancs area from Preston and all the way down to Bolton. But also we have some sort of tickets that cover a smaller area, so the sort of Chorley town area, including Buckshaw. There are tickets that will take you even further afield as well. We've seen an increasing switch in recent times. People still pay cash on the bus, and that's fine, but we've seen a lot of people switching to buying their tickets through a mobile app. Don't need to have change available or cash in the pockets, or via a smart card on the bus as well. And interestingly, and this is particularly accelerated since COVID came in, contactless payments on the bus now account for around 60% of transactions and have effectively gone from nothing over the last couple of years since contactless payment was introduced on vehicles, now through to 60%. And we've been trying to encourage people not to pay cash on buses, but equally that is still there for those people who don't have a card and can't pay in other ways. And then finally, our app now to try and give some confidence to people in terms of when buses are actually going to turn up. You don't need to sort of stand at the bus stop and look down the street and see if you can see it in the distance. There is live tracking available on our app for all the buses in the area, and also a recent thing is a busy bus indicator. So using ticket machine data, we can put onto the app details of which journeys are likely to be very busy and which ones are quieter. So some people who want to try and avoid those busier journeys can try and target journeys that we know are always lesser used, which obviously is an issue at the moment, won't be as much so once social distancing finishes. So and that brings us on to, I think, the questions that were listed.
Yeah, so you've asked us a number of questions. What we've tried to do is to sort of capture each question and a few of the key points to talk about. And as I said, very happy to take some questions as we go along, or at the end, however you wish to do that. So how does the Deregulation Act affect Stagecoach, was the question. And in a sense, without the Deregulation Act, it's quite possible Stagecoach wouldn't be here. Its founders, who many of you will have heard of, Brian Souter and Anne Globe, were set up a small family business in Scotland, and they took advantage of the opportunity to acquire private bus companies as the government privatised various bus companies around the country. So the business has grown very much out of the Transport Act itself. In terms of deregulation, what deregulation means is that the market operates in itself. In effect, operators will run a bus service where it is commercially sustainable. In simple terms, that means where the revenue collected on the bus covers the costs of operating it, and ideally we then make a profit. And that means that the majority of the bus network is provided without subsidy, without direct subsidy. So about 95% of Stagecoach's operations are commercial. Where there's gaps in the network, a service is perhaps socially necessary, and it's not being provided commercially. They can be, for example, services to hospitals, services in the evening, late or early morning, or on a Sunday at quieter times. Then those services are contracted. They're tendered by the local authority. In our case, that's Lancashire County Council, and normally they're awarded to the lowest bidder. And that can lead to the situation you'll get where a service is operated by one bus company in the daytime, as an example, and another on the evening and on a Sunday. So the Transport Act in '95 undoubtedly was to reduce the costs of bus operation, and some of the huge subsidies that were going into the then nationally owned bus operations. So that's the way public transport still operates today. So the majority of Stagecoach services are provided by us. We set the timetable, the fares, the routes, and it's demand that drives them. And then a small number of the services are paid for and secured by Lancashire County Council, some of which Stagecoach run, some of which are run by others. And for example, in Charlie, the daytime local town services are run by Tyrers. One of the things that's happened over the last 10 years, particularly since about 2010, is that local authorities have considerably reduced their spending on bus services. That's because of the pressures they've been under, particularly with social care. We're very fortunate that Lancashire hasn't reduced their spending as much as a number of other local authorities. Nevertheless, they have had to make some cuts, some reductions, but there are one or two local authorities, for example, Cumbria, not too far away, who no longer pays for any bus services at all outside of education. So undoubtedly, there's been a large reduction in government spending. Now, in 2017, I should say, the Bus Services Act, there's a T missing. A new piece of legislation came in, and that provides some new opportunities for local authorities to have greater control of a bus network. There are two kinds of partnership: an advanced partnership and an enhanced partnership. I could go into real detail about what they mean, but very simply, the bus operators would make some commitments on investment, on frequency, service levels, and in return for a partnership with a local authority, whereby there's some commitments on infrastructure, typically bus priority, maybe new bus station facilities as well. And in terms of an enhanced partnership, there's the ability to do a little bit more with fares. We have to work within the competition legislation, so we can't sit down and agree joint fares with other bus companies. in an enhanced partnership, there's a little bit more scope to do work together on simplified fare structures, for example. And the final kind of opportunity that's available under the Bus Services Act is franchising. So many of you will have heard about bus franchising, particularly in Greater Manchester. And franchising is only available to mayoral combined authorities where there's devolution. It is available on request to other local authorities, and there has to be an assessment and some legislative changes. Cornwall is one of those examples where they're pursuing the request to have bus franchising powers. Bus franchising is in place in London. That's the way the London bus network works. It is not a panacea. It does not solve some of the problems we have. It can provide better integrated ticketing. It can provide better levels of service, but only if you put the money into it. That's the challenge. London's got one of the highest subsidised transport networks in the country. Well, it is the highest, in fact. And even in London, bus usage is declining. So bus franchising will not solve the problems of congestion, as an example, and it undoubtedly needs a lot of funding. It's also quite slow to deliver. So the Deregulation Act, as a headline, is still here, and we operate in a deregulated market. Very simply, we set the timetable, the route, and the fares. We don't just do that in isolation. We do that by working very, very closely with Lancashire County Council and trying to listen to what our customers and you, our stakeholders, and what people want. And we'll come back a bit more later on to about profitability of bus routes. In fact, that's the next point. So what's the process behind creating, maintaining and discontinuing a bus route? Could really talk about this all day. The majority of our bus network are long-standing routes. The 125 has been there for years. I remember, I actually live at the other end of the route in Bolton, which is where I'm sat now. I remember the 125 as a child. So it's been there for many, many years. And a lot of our network is like that. Over the time, some of those routes have increased. So the 125, I think, was every half an hour. It wasn't every 10 minutes that it is today. And some have been extended. Again, the 125 now runs to Preston Royal Hospital, while others have reduced. And we've seen, sadly, over a number of years, the decline of local buses in Chorley, and the town services have reduced, and they've been funded for a while, and now the funding has ended for some of them as well. So the network's contracted in some areas, but there has been expansion. So the 125 being an example of that. And typically these days we're focused a bit more on core routes that link key places. To change a route, we just give 70 days notice. I say just give 70 days notice. Almost sounds a bit flippant. We consult with customers on changes. We consult with local authorities. In terms of what we do in changing routes, well, why would we change a route? We do need our routes to cover their direct operating costs. That is generally our minimum position. We do have one or two routes that lose money, where we try to take a network approach and look at the wider area. But we do have a problem if the fares collected are not going to cover the direct costs. And when I say fares collected, we're paid for concessionary travel, so it's not always the fare we take over the cab door with the driver. It's also the other income that comes in, the money for the Lancashire County Council pay us for concessionary travel being one example, and there's several other income streams as well. One thing I think is just worth talking about in terms of the process behind operating a bus route, when we talk to people, there's a bit of a view that we should run smaller buses because they're cheaper. They're not much cheaper. There's a small saving in fuel, the driver's wage is the same, and the vehicles are cheaper to buy, basically. Parts are often not dissimilar. And in fact, a lot of the smaller buses made by people like Mercedes-Benz, good quality vehicles, not cheap on parts. So, and in terms of labour costs, a bus driver's wage is around 60% the cost of running a bus. So they're actually often quite uneconomic, a small bus. You can only get 25 people on it, and the costs are pretty similar. We're better being able to get 50 or 70 people on. So every one of our routes is effectively a profit and loss unit. We monitor the revenue and passenger trend on the routes, manage the operating costs, measure them, and with two levels of managing that route. One's the direct cost, that's fuel, drivers' wages, bus parts, vehicle depreciation. The other is the full overheads, and the full overheads means the depot costs, things like a manager's wage, the gas bill, the site cost, the rent, the rate. So you can have bus routes that make money. When you apply the cost of the depot, share it out amongst the routes, make a route profitable. You have to measure all these levels. Now, where a route doesn't cover its cost, we look at actions. I don't know if someone wants to ask me a question, or it's just.
Yeah, well, I thought, well, do you want to finish a bit on this question, and then we'll take it after each question, because there's a few people with some hands up now. So I think if we do it a question at a time for questions, otherwise we'll be all over the place. We could, as you say, we could talk all day, couldn't we? Thank you. The problem I have, all I can see is PowerPoint, nothing else. So I'll finish this slide, and then we'll do some questions. Thank you. So we take action where it's performing, or where there's an opportunity. So as an example, we felt that there was a demand for running through to Preston Royal Hospital. So we're continually monitoring each route as a business unit and managing it. Now, getting a new route off the ground is incredibly hard. There are not many examples around the country of new bus routes. But we do look at these opportunities, and typically we extend a route and launch a whole new one. We do a market assessment, we do some market research, we look at demographics, we'll talk to stakeholders, we measure the investment that's required, we cost out the operating costs and a revenue projection, literally how many people we need to carry, what the average fare will be, how it will grow, what the marketing costs are, and how long it will take to break even. And we're probably looking at 2 to 3 years to break even, and any other funding that we can get. So just as an example, each bus needs over 100,000 a year of revenue just to break even. So to put it into context, if we were to launch a bus route with 5 buses on, we need $500,000 of revenue to break even. Now, bus industry operating margins are actually quite low. They're usually single figures. My whole company did before the crisis make $6 million a year. So investing $500,000 of your profit, and that profit's needed to buy new vehicles as well as pay shareholders and all the other things. We need capital investment, is actually quite difficult to do. So new bus routes are quite challenging, and they're often done, and it will come on to this a bit later, in partnership with local authorities through things like Section 106 funding, as an example. So we'll take some questions. Yeah, so first one, we've got June.
Hello. Not necessarily new routes. It's thinking about adapting ones that you've got, which seems to make sense to me. I'm councillor for Adlington, Camden area. Yeah. So I'm on the lovely 125 bus route, which sounds ideal. But Adlington is a village of 2 ends.
Yeah, I know Adlington. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the bottom end of Adlington gets the 8A twice a day. 3 times a day, which gives them very limited time to shop in Adlington, in Chorley, and doesn't fulfil the needs going to the surgery, the clinic, the library, things like that. We've asked countless times if a couple of the 125 buses, perhaps on the hour and a half hour, could actually just be rerouted down Railway Road, along West Horton Road. It doesn't get them up Park Road, but it gets them nearer to a bus. Along West Horton Road, join along the A6 and join at Skew Bridge again. Yeah. And we've asked time and time again. When we were doing under the electrification programme, that's what the bus did. It came down Railway Road and it was well used. And we got lovely new bus stops, but unfortunately now we've no buses to use all those. So actually just rerouting that bus would actually tackle a lot of the things. And the other one, I noticed one of the other questions is about social isolation, and it would tackle that in half of the village. And we've asked time and time again if that could be looked at, and we keep getting told no, it can't, because the buses can't get round the corner, but they did for 18 months.
Do you want to take 3 questions at a time? Just then is that all right? Because we've got 6 people with their hands up. If we do 3 and then another 3, is that okay?
Yeah, I'll just make sure I write them down and not forget them.
Sorry, is that all right?
Thanks for that anyway.
Thank you.
I hope we've not got to finish at 7. Go on.
Sorry, we've got Yvonne.
Hi, Matt.
Hi.
I'm a fan of the 125. I have to say, get off the train and straight to the 125, and I can walk home from there. My ward area is Clayton North, Clayton Brook. I don't know if you know that, through to Preston. And some of my residents, particularly at one of the residents' meetings, actually said that although the fares seem reasonable, if you've got 4 children and an adult going into Chorley and back again, it's £24.90. And they asked if it was possible to have a family ticket. If there's a possibility that Stagecoach could look at providing a family ticket for people on with more children, because the majority of these people in my area are on low incomes.
Yeah. Okay, I've got that family ticket. And what's the third question?
And then the third one, Gordon.
Hi, more of a comment really. I know Lancashire County Council are the people that do the tendering, but I would like to express my gratitude to the borough who have presented, and I think they're still paying 50% for the evening service around Epping, Withnell, Brinskull. At one stage they were paying 70%, and at the moment it's 50 plus 10% from the parish councils. So since 2014, the borough has been paying the lion's share of the subsidy on that evening route. I know it's not one of yours, but I'd just like to put that fact forward and hope that will continue.
Yeah, we do run some evening services that are funded by yourselves, actually. So Lancashire tender them on your behalf. So thank you. So in terms of Adlington, this is a real. I've been in buses 25 years, and this question regularly comes up, the same sort of scenario. Could 2 of these journeys per hour or 1 go a slightly different route? And sometimes there are issues like the bus can't get round or it's not ideal. And as you've just said, the bus has gone down there when there's a diversion. And there are situations as a bus operator where it's not ideal and bends and turns are sharp, and we're not very keen on doing it, but we do it when we've no choice. But in this example, the main reason we don't wish to do this is bus routes that are the best are the ones that are simplest. They're all the same. They're every 10 minutes. You don't need a timetable. The journey time's broadly the same. The bus goes the same route. And all the major bus operators will tell you the same. When you start sending 2 a different route, there's 2 things that happen. You've then got an imbalanced frequency on the section they miss out. Now, in this example, some of it's not got a lot of housing, I know that, but you've an imbalance of frequency, and then the journey takes a bit longer. It only needs to take 2 or 3 minutes longer, and that 10-minute frequency, which is hard enough to maintain anyway, you end up with buses bunching, becomes a scheduled 7-minute gap, and then a 13-minute gap. So for us to route to an hour differently, we need to be convinced that the revenue and patronage will actually be better overall than sticking to the more direct, the simpler route. And it's also viewed by some passengers riding on the longer journey as being a bit of a detour. Now, so that's my explanation why we're not keen, but it's not an untypical example. Throughout my career, and James will tell you the same, we will get these requests, and it's about whether the focus should be on a mainline direct route that's the same with a high frequency, or whether we should start having variations to try and serve society more. But as we're operating on a commercial basis, that is why we're operating the direct core routes. It's not the answer you want. That's my explanation.
I want to come back on that. I'm sorry.
Yeah, come back, June. Yeah.
Buses already bunch.
Yeah.
You stand at the bus stop in Adlington and you get 3. They're overtaking one another. So it's already happening. So it wouldn't take any longer to actually come down Railway Road and go along that road. It wouldn't add that much to the journey.
Well,
and it used to, all you'd have to do is number them differently, 125 and a 126, which has happened in the past. I'm sorry, you're a bus service, so we should be looking at the passengers. You talk about social isolation later on, it would help with that. You talk about putting those buses where they're needed in the community, and they are needed at this part of the village. And I'm sorry, but we're going to agree to disagree on this, but I think it's an easy solution to that problem.
There is an easy solution, and I'll be frank, that is not in our commercial interest. One thing I absolutely assure you was, if it was in our commercial interest, we would do it. We would do it.
And so, I think it would be in your commercial interest, because there'd be people who would take a short journey, who would actually use up and down Railway Road. It's very difficult for a lot of people. That's where our clinic is. That's where the doctor's surgery is. That's where the library is. And that's where pensioners groups are. And those people can't get to those places.
I do understand that, and I sympathise with them, but we do believe it's not commercially in our interest. As I said, if it was, we would look at doing it. We would explore it, and it's not an untypical scenario. We find that the routes that are all the same are simplest to what generate the most growth, and that's how the 125 has been successful, because it used to be half hourly many years ago, and as you say, there were some 126s as well, which went the other way. So then so I'll say I can't give you the answer you want on that. The other question we had, I'll look towards James, our commercial director. It was about fares and adults and children. So do you want to take that one, James?
Yeah, I think it was about groups travelling. Was it Clayton broke into Chorley?
Yes, it was. Yes.
It down correctly. Yeah. At the moment, I'm just checking my facts on it in the background there. We offer a family ticket, which is £11.50, which is a day ticket, which is up to 2 adults and up to 3 children, and that effectively covers all of Preston, South Ribble, Chorley, and down as far as Bolton. So effectively, a group of people of up to 5 people, of 2 adults and 3 children, can travel. It's £11.50 for a day ticket.
Right. Okay, that's interesting, because some of the people don't realise that that's available.
Quite
so perhaps
that is a challenge.
They don't know it's available because it came up in a residents' meeting. So
we need a bit more to promote that, don't we?
I think there's more work to be done to promote some of the. I mean, some of the, the basic day tickets are well known because they're the kind of things that a majority of people are buying, all the weekly tickets. But there's definitely more work for us to do to promote some of the other tickets that perhaps don't sell as highly, but are very useful to some people and can offer a lot better value than buying individual tickets. So yeah, I would take that point on board.
Thank you.
Okay, and then I think Gordon's was more sort of a comment rather than a question, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So yeah, if we catch the next 3, Laura, Julia, then Tommy. Laura.
Thank you, Chair. A few comments, and questions. The first one was you talked about consulting passengers and the 70-day notice. I represent Astley Village and Buckshaw Village. The bus that was running through Astley Village was taken off without almost any notice whatsoever. You may have done 70 days consultation with Lancashire, but they sat on the information. How did you manage to consult the passengers if nobody knew it was happening? That's my first one.
Could I just ask a question? I joined this area of Stagecoach in February, actually, having been in the MP over in South Yorkshire for a while. How long ago was it when the Astley bus was took off now? Was it quite a while ago?
No, it was a year last July.
Yeah, I'll look to...
So it's 18 months ago. Yeah. Now, the other one I would like to ask is particularly related to what June was saying about the 125, when she mentioned, funnily enough, somebody had a conversation with me today and told me about the 125 bunching. But the problem with all of this is we have buses now that go to places people don't want to go to, so they won't get on them. What people really need in the Chorley area, to meet the fact that the 125 runs right through Chorley, but if you look at the map of Chorley, the bulk of the housing is on the west side, not the east side. And we have very, very poor services on the west side. Most people would love to use the 125 if only they could find a viable way to link with it. but they can't, and that's the big problem. We used to have a bus called the Chorley Circular, sadly many years ago, and it went right round the outer part of the town. It didn't go out into the villages, it went round the outer part of the town, and it was always packed because people hopped on and off, as was raised at the issue in Adlington. So it was a very viable service. I know that when the bus depot went, it was lost, but the point is that actually would enable people to use the wondrous 125 that for some reason is the gold standard, and everybody else is left out in the cold.
Okay, thank you. So, first of all,
sorry, I apologise. Should we just take the next couple, and then otherwise we'll bunch them together? Apologise. Julia.
125.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I want to really talk about the future of bus travel, and you know, we're talking about sustainability, and I'd like to look at the passenger, and I'd also like to look at the future of buses. And at the moment, you know, we're in a situation where everything's just flat because of COVID, and the greatest impact it's had on public service, public transport. You know, it's just can't quantify how dreadful it's been, really. So what we need to have is safe buses back again, with people obviously using the best they can. But what bus service people want, or the wider population want, is seamless convenience. They want they've got an end-to-end journey to make, and part of that is having you know, bus on demand, almost like we're happy with the cashless transaction. They want short waits and they want faster travel time, and the thing is, they want sort of information that's at hand and communication that allows them to make their journey in the safest, quickest, most enjoyable way possible. So if that's what customers want, and you're saying you've done a lot of market research, I think that it does, to an extent, that research will stand, will almost like be halted in a way on the viability of bus services as they were. But we're talking about the future and sustainability. So we might be seeing the end of the bus driver with, you know, self-driving electric buses in the future. And, you know, there's a lot of, you know, new technologies coming together to actually enhance that public transport experience. And I just wondered, how is Stagecoach pitching themselves for the future? Thanks.
Okay.
And then we'll just do Tommy's, and then we'll come back to you. Thanks.
Trying to remember all this. Go on.
Sorry.
Hello, Matt. I'm Councillor for Exton North. A while ago, when Buckshaw Village opened up, you diverted the 109 completely down Exton Lane and through Buckshaw, leaving people isolated from the Bayhorse up to Leyland. And then you put a minibus on at the estate where you go part way up there, and then you knock that off. So all those people between the Bayhorse and Leyland have been isolated for years. Can you not split the 109 and make, you know, every half hour straight on up the A49 and one through Buckshaw instead of having all the lot going through Buckshaw? They've already got about 2 or 3 buses going through there to Preston.
Okay, thank you. Is that all the questions so far?
Yeah, that's it, okay. If you can do something about it.
First of all, really happy to answer these questions, and James and I are happy to have contact with you whenever you want and do these questions, because we're not a problem answering them. Often this local detail is more important to you than some of the bigger issues, so we are happy to have a forum for that, either after this or any time you want. First of all, in terms of Astley, might sound a cop-out. I don't have the detail, not working in the area at the time. In 1 second, I'll look to James. Now, about consultation, it is only latterly in the last about 18 months, 12 months, that Stagecoach nationally has started saying, before we make a change, we're going to consult with customers. We will advertise comments, we will inform them what they're doing. So I'm not sure if that happened in Astley, whether that was before we took this approach on major changes. I've come from the Yorkshire section. I'm not a Yorkshireman, no, I'm a Lancastrian, I must just tell you that. And come from the Yorkshire section. So for the last 18 months in Yorkshire, we have been doing those consultations both publicly and with stakeholders, inviting comments before we make change. So I don't know whether the Astley one was a long time ago. Was it quite a while ago now, James?
I think it was July last year, possibly. I think it was last year. Yeah.
It was.
And were they our services or were they contracted services?
They were our services principally. There was some funding from LCC for parts of it, but it was at the latter stages, it was our commercial service.
I mean, I can only give you a commitment as the managing director moving forwards that if we're going to make some major change, and a major change means that we're going to change the route, we're going to make a major change to the frequency. So a 10-minute bus becoming a 15 isn't viewed as major. You might view it as major, but we wouldn't necessarily consult on that. But if we're going to go from half hourly to hourly, we're going to go down different roads, we're going to stop running in the evening or the Sunday, anything like that, we will consult. I can only give you that commitment for the future. There
was absolutely no consultation, and furthermore, by dropping the bus service to hourly meant that actually less people get on it, purely and simply because it doesn't serve the purpose for which it's intended, which is to get people to Chorley and back, or Chorley and beyond from there. And the other thing that's very irritating to an awful lot of people is that, as was pointed out by another councillor, all the buses go through Buckshaw, but in actual fact they have a fast railway line. Yeah. They don't really need all those buses.
Oh, I'll pick up the Buckshaw one in a minute. So just in terms of the key point, and this will come up again, we don't reduce services or withdraw them if they weren't viable. Now, there will always be feedback that, well, there were some people on some journeys, but overall, we don't reduce them if they're viable. It's not in our interest to do that. And Chorley Depot, sadly, closed and became a small unit at Cowling Grow because it was loss-making. And we couldn't, and the investment in the site just couldn't be sustained. So that was genuinely the position. And what we've seen in Chorley is no different to many other towns we operate buses in. Over years, the demand for travelling to the town has reduced. Concessionary travel has reduced substantially. It's typically gone down 5% a year. My parents are in the 70s. They have a car each. When I was a child, my grandparents would be on the bus all the time. And this is one of the things that's happened. And it's fundamentally driven down our demand. So these changes, when we have made them, they're not made just to increase profit. It's not about that. It's actually because the thing's losing money. The next point I had was about the west of Chorley, and I think probably that almost links into Buckshaw Village as well, and the 109. There's been a lot of housing developments in that area, as you know, and when Nick talks about planning, we're going to talk a little bit more about that. It is quite difficult to serve. In terms of the 109, do you want to come in, James? It's basically back to about frequency, I think, isn't it? Whether we start rerouting some of them by different routes.
It is. I mean, when Buckshaw was in its early stages of development, the 109 was running every 15 minutes. There was 4 buses an hour, and that was being paid for. It was being pump primed by the Section 106 funding from the developers at Buckshaw. That had a finite lifespan of 5 years. And the hope was after the 5 years that service would be sustainable at those kind of levels in the long term. It wasn't, so we had to cut it back to every 30 minutes, which is what it is now. There was also, there were some diversions on there, bits around Exton where we looped around an estate in Exton, which I think's been mentioned. Fishwicks, which is obviously an operator that ceased trading a few years ago, used to operate buses through Exton and past Buckshaw as well, which haven't been replaced by the county council. They were never sort of commercially viable. So yeah, it's difficult. But Buckshaw's effectively got 2 buses an hour through it now, which is kind of its natural for us commercially viable state. Now, if we were to serve other parts of the A49 along the main road, that would mean 1 bus an hour in Buckshaw, and then the bus kind of becomes completely unattractive in Buckshaw, and nobody, very few people would want to use it if it's hourly. Half hourly is kind of the minimum for realistically for a commercial service. You get to hourly, you generally find services are more sort of county council supported. So that's been the difficulty. And I know Astley Village has been mentioned as Astley Village used to have 4 buses an hour to and from Chorley town centre, and we used to have 12 buses running around Chorley on what was called Network Chorley back in 2006. And progressively over the years, that's been reduced from 12 to sort of 10 to 8 to 6 to 4, and now to no Stagecoach minibuses running around in Chorley. There's a couple of Lancashire County Council ones, because unfortunately they whatever we've done and whichever sort of format we've tried, with and without county council funding, it has never been commercially viable, and that's unfortunately been the reality of it. Hence why now there have been no other providers who stepped in and provided any commercial services around the town. On the local services, it's fallen to Lancashire County Council as the Transport Authority to provide some of those, and it's unfortunate, because obviously if we could make that work, we would have wanted to make that work, because why wouldn't we, as a commercial operator? We would need those opportunities to carry on. So it's been really difficult to sustain some of these more minor variations or local services in Chorley, other than the main road routes.
And then the other point was about to the future. Bus on, and I made some notes about bus on demand, short waits. Yes, we have research, and people do want to use public transport. That's really good. They want to be able to do it digitally, to track the bus, to see when it's coming, to be able to pay by other means. So, and we now have a lot of this technology. We have a bus app which shows you on a map where the bus is. You can buy a ticket on your mobile phone. You can pay by contactless. But of course, the bus needs to come down your street where you live at the time you want. The best way to do that is on a demand-responsive way, and there are several trials across the country of smaller type vehicles, and they do need to be small to penetrate the areas of housing and get close to where people live, where it's a bit like a shared taxi. It's called demand-responsive transport, whereby you can book a journey at short notice, and it picks you up and takes you to town or your destination, so railway station, hospital, etc. For a bus fare. At the moment, none of these projects that are being experimented on are commercially viable, but the experiments are going on, and they need some government support. So the challenge is to be able to provide these services sustainably. We did a very large experiment in Ashford in the last couple of years that's similar to this, and sadly it was unsuccessful, and some of the routes have gone back to being big buses and some haven't continued. So yes, there is demand and there's interest, but it has to be sustainable for us. And there's a huge investment in getting these things off the ground. So it really has to be a business case that we believe in and that can be supported. If I'll just check with the chair. Some of the questions, is it worth us sort of finishing our slides then taking them? Because
I think, because we'll let you do your presentation.
Well, definitely. We've got all night, we're here to serve.
We don't want to be. I did, Mark. If we take, I missed Mark Clifford off. That was my fault. It keeps flashing up on the screen. And then if we let you finish your presentation, and then we can take the question. Is that all right?
Take questions, yeah. So there's a question from Mark.
Yep, thank you. I'm the council's champion for environment. You'll have heard about our climate pledge we have in Chorley in the report presented by Zoe. Now my questions are to do with the present and future of your bus fleet. It's quite important to me, this. What fuel mixtures are you currently using? And obviously you'll have a forward plan for your fleet when you're going to renew it. How soon will that be before you actually become zero emission? That's something very important for the clean air strategy.
Absolutely. So first of all, a Euro 6, the latest bus, diesel, we use diesel, basic diesel. The latest Euro 6 bus, diesel bus, is cleaner than a Euro 6 diesel car. And it can get 75 cars off the road. So we have to dispel the myth that buses, the latest buses, are dirty and polluting. Yes, they are more polluting than zero emission, undoubtedly, but a bus in itself is very clean. Now, in terms of a future investment, we've made a pledge as a large operator, Stagecoach, with several of the other large operators, that after 2024, we will not buy, we will only go to zero emission vehicles. Now, that pledge was made before COVID. We would hope to be able to maintain it, but I cannot stress enough that COVID has reset the economics of running buses at the moment. So, but that's the pledge we've made. By 2024, we'll switch to zero emissions for all future purchases. We buy a bus to last 15 years of age. A single decker bus costs £180,000, double decker bus about 250. If we go to an electric vehicle, we're looking around 380k, 380,000, 400,000. And if we go to a hydrogen bus, we're looking about 550,000. So we can buy 3 Euro 6 single deckers for one hydrogen bus. So there are some challenges. Now, of course, if we buy electric and we buy hydrogen, we will in theory save some money in fuel. So you pay more for your bus and you save in fuel. But there's some considerable investment in infrastructure, in depot charging. Frequently a new substation is needed as well. You can't just have 15 buses in a depot being charged. You need a new substation. Hydrogen requires the workshops to be modified. So there is some challenges with these technology. We've just took delivery of, I think it's 30 electric buses in Manchester now. We're in discussions about hydrogen buses in Liverpool at the moment. The technology's coming, the costs are coming down, but it is very, very expensive at the moment. And without some government financial support towards the capital costs of a hydrogen or electric bus, to pay a little bit of a difference, part of the difference between a conventional and a zero emission bus, there's just not been a commercial business case for these vehicles. So it's coming, it's improving. We are starting to do projects that are pilot projects, but we are some way off going to all zero emission. And the new buses we're still buying at the moment, they're going to run for potentially up to 15 years. The other thing, sadly, at the minute, we've had to halt capital investment. During the pandemic, we're very, very grateful for the government support. We've done all the things you would expect of a PLC, executive pay cuts, pay freezes for everybody else, all capital investments halted. Now, as it stands at the minute, we're not ordering any new buses for 2021. That may change. It depends how we're going to come out of the pandemic. So there are some challenges ahead. But we will get to zero emissions. It's going to take a long time, and my key message is that the Euro 6 bus is clean. We will be shortly retrofitting all our buses on the 125 from Euro 5 to Euro 6. We'll be doing that because Greater Manchester will be having a clean air zone. There will be some funding towards that, but we need to be doing our bit as well. And there are additional costs of operating those Euro 6 buses. So I can't give you the answer I want yet, but if we just took the cars off the road, or some of them, that would actually improve our air. We've all seen the benefits of reduced traffic early on in lockdown and the improvements in air quality. And we need to use this. We need to try and maintain that moving forwards. Is that okay for now?
Yeah, and please. Yeah, I'm pleased to hear that you pledged not to, buy any pollution emitting vehicles after 2024. But it will be very nice to see the phasing out of some of these buses. Not overly happy to hear that the average lifespan is 15 years. I would like to see the old fleet, retired earlier.
Well, okay, and that's what the bus industry do. When you pay £280,000 for a double decker, you need to run it 15 years, and it'll have a new engine. Can have to have new axles. All sorts of components will be changed. Gearbox in the lifespan of the vehicle. The seats will be redone. They're so expensive that is typically the way we procure buses. So I'll move on.
Thank you. No, appreciate that.
Thanks.
So I'm conscious of time, but in terms of funding opportunities for Stagecoach, they're fairly limited, and that's not a complaint. But so we make a profit. The profit's reinvested back in the business in terms of investment, capital investment, and of course we are a PLC, and some money goes to shareholders. No money's going to shareholders this year, I assure you of that. Our dividend is suspended. In terms of funding, there is Section 106 funding. We work with local authorities about that. James mentioned Buckshire Village. And actually, I wrote this before that question come up. What happens when the money runs out? Section 106 is very, very good, but the idea is a service becomes sustainable over a number of years, and sometimes that doesn't happen. And in the case of Bookshare, it hasn't happened. But what's happened is car ownerships continue to increase, the high streets declined, more older people are driving. So society changes have outstripped the potential for the service to be sustainable. But Section 106 money can be available to us. We can get de minimis funding from time to time if the local authority have the money. De minimis is where we're paid some money to vary a service or extend it where it wouldn't be commercially viable. And sometimes that's done to pump prime, to encourage the service and to generate some growth. And then there's other sources of government funding. They are generally competitive bids, and they're normally done in conjunction with local authorities. So the local authority will submit the bid, and some examples are Transforming Cities Fund, Clean Bus Technology Fund, the Electric Bus Town, the Metro Bus Networks. These are all recent government funds where you can bid for funding to enhance bus services. So that work is normally done with an operator and the local authority. They can be frustrating because they're competitive bids. So a lot of effort can go into it for 3 or 4 to be shortlisted and 1 to be successful. But nevertheless, you've got to be in it to win it. How can you influence bus services and how they run? This tonight is a good example. By talking to us, it does have some influence. We won't always be able to meet your needs. I've got to be clear with that. But talking to us nationally through MPs, central government, DFT, and locally via Lancashire County Council, we really need a national bus strategy. Buses are the most widely used form of public transport, but they don't get anything like the funding that rail gets from central government. So by influencing people who set policy and strategy and decide where the money goes, and locally through pro-bus planning decisions where we can get good access for buses, Section 106 support to help perhaps start that off, and close working with Lancashire County Council, and of course the direct funding that you're doing. But I know that you will have funding challenges, and I know they will be worse as a result of COVID. The next one's a really difficult one to sort of answer. How can you get services where they're needed in the community? So the good examples come up about Adlington and the social need where we're not serving. And at the moment, unless the market provides what we believe sufficiently commercial demand, then some form of funding is needed, and that is the challenge. I'll just go through the other slides and then we can take some more questions, because I know there will be questions on some of these. So what initiatives are being developed and deployed to create sustainable public transport? I've got 3 areas here: bus priority schemes, integrated ticketing, and digital information. So bus priority schemes, we need to make journeys faster and more reliable. We need to do that by avoiding traffic congestion. Now, we've seen some real changes this year. We've seen empty roads and it's much busier again now, but the peak hour congestion is still not there like it was at the moment. So our punctuality and reliability is the best it's ever been. James said 92% of buses are starting on time. That's the figure for the year. We've been doing 95%, 96%. When our bus held up in congestion, we can run so much more reliably. And you've talked about bunching of buses. If I had £1 for every time someone had said buses were bunching, I'd be a rich man. It is a real challenge to stop buses bunching. What happens is one picks up a lot of people or gets held up by some minor delays, ends up running 3 or 4 minutes later, and the next one catches it up. It's a real difficult challenge unless we space them with waiting time at stops, and then people get frustrated sitting on buses that are waiting. So bus priority involving reallocation of road space, which needs some tough political decisions, because that affects the motorists. More bus lanes, bus priority at traffic lights, they can help make public transport more sustainable. We're also responsible for the buses in Chester. James and myself, we've got quite a wide area, and in Chester we've had 2 new bus lanes put in, bus and cycle lanes, as a result of COVID and trying to encourage active travel. And it's a very, very brave thing for colleagues in Chester to do, because there is some concern from motorists about increased car journey times. But in the long term, it will improve the attractiveness of bus. In terms of integrated ticketing, we need to develop ticketing so it's valid on Preston Bus, it's valid on Stagecoach, it's valid on Tyrers, and remove some of the confusion in the different products. We have smart card ticketing. We've developed that considerably. We've got contactless payments, mobile payments, young people ticketing offers up to 18 and 19 years of age. So we are promoting these. We are giving discounts. In terms of digital information, I can pull up a map now and show you where every one of our buses is. We're releasing our data openly as well. So the information is now digital. And then we've talked about innovation, demand responsive trial transport. There are trials going on around the country with demand responsive services, but as yet we've not found a way as a bus industry of making them sustainable. Social isolation is a really important issue. It's very difficult for us to solve on our own. We need to do a lot more. It's currently limited. Buses actually is the key to tackling socialisation. It can help people get out and about. We can provide access to healthcare, access to college, to education, to work. The fundamental issue we have is those services need to be sustainable. They need to either cover the costs or they need funding support. And that's where the challenge lies. So currently it's limited. What are we doing at Stagecoach? We have a back on board scheme where we offer half price travel to all job seekers. That's something that Stagecoach is doing itself. We do a lot of driver training and customer care to help people with disabilities, to help drivers understand their needs and make sure we're providing the right kind of service and care. And then the local authorities provide some tendered services. But as we've touched upon a couple of times, or I have, funding is quite constrained at the moment. So Lancashire County Council has made reductions in recent years. We need to do a lot more to tackle social isolation, but it's very difficult for Stagecoach just to do that without support and assistance. Our challenge is to keep our services sustainable. And then I think we've got one more slide, and then we could take some questions, and we could move on to the planning section if you wish. So what's been done to improve bus services and encourage more users? I've touched upon digital already, really. We've got the live bus tracking. What is better than being able to check where your bus is, to check it's running, to have that confidence? And if a journey's not running, nobody likes that, but we can show that it's cancelled. And at least you're not stuck there wondering if the bus is going to come. And then we've got the contactless payments and mobile ticketing. You all know about the specification of our gold buses, Wi-Fi, leather coach seats, enhanced CCTV. That's now a Stagecoach standard specification. So luxury seats, and it was Wi-Fi. Actually, I'll just touch upon Wi-Fi. We've currently temporarily suspended our Wi-Fi as a cost-saving measure. It costs Stagecoach nationally a couple of million a year. And interestingly, we've had about 2 complaints since it was suspended. We think it's probably slightly less important now, as most users have 4G on their phone. And the main users are children with limited data allowances streaming videos. So Wi-Fi is temporarily paused. Bus cleanliness, we've really improved our bus cleanliness recently. With COVID, there's been a bit of a wake-up call. We're all very acutely aware of the importance of cleanliness now, and we've actually put a lot more money and investment into cleaning. Probably we shouldn't need a pandemic to do that, but it's become acutely aware, and we've put so much effort in. Every vehicle would get mopped every other day. We're mopping every bus every day, as example now, and create some additional jobs there. We have vehicle telematics for the smoothness of ride. We can monitor the driver's driving standard and follow that up appropriately. We've undertook a number of marketing campaigns. Been a lot of our advertising on Rock FM radio. We do direct mail drops, free discount journey vouchers. the stuff I'm talking about is very much before COVID, and it will come back in time. So you won't hear our radio advertisements at the moment because we've reduced our expenditure. Yeah, and to illustrate it, we're a business with 100% of operating costs and 50% of revenue at the moment. So we very much appreciate some government support to help us get through this, but we are minimising expenditure. Customer care training and route developments. So the most recent one's the 125 running to Preston Royal Hospital. And then we do a lot of corporate ticket sales as well. We work with colleges, hospitals, large employers to sell tickets direct to them at a discount to encourage bus use. I finish this point with, but people need a reason to travel. We really need our centres to remain vibrant and policies which encourage public transport use and restrain car use. So places where bus use is the most successful, obviously a lot bigger than Charlie, places like Oxford and Cambridge, but they've got car parking policies that actually using the car is quite expensive and it's often slower than using the bus. And where those measures are in, public transport really does prosper. So it's probably worth pausing for some more questions because the next section will be Nick talking about planning. Are you happy to do that, Chair? Is that the best thing to do?
Yeah, we can do that. We can do that. Are there any comments or questions? So I've got Tommy.
Yeah. If that's all right, to do one at a time. Okay?
Yeah, sorry, rather than bombard you.
Right. Right, Matt. A few years ago, it was mentioned about bringing the trams back to Preston and then coming through to Chorley. Is it still going on, this, or has it been kicked into touch?
I have absolutely no idea, and I'm sorry about that. I don't think it is because I'm not aware of any developments on last, James. What I will tell you is one tram will cost you 2 million. We can you 20 new buses for that price, and if we have a bus lane or a bus only road, we can give a fabulous service, be up and running in 6 months rather than several years, and deliver a tram sort of style quality service. And there are some schemes like Cambridge Guided Busway, Belfast Glider. Everybody loves a tram. I know that it has a more spacious feel, but we can try and replicate the best bits of that with a bus priority scheme, a bus rapid transit scheme. There's one in Bristol now as well. So James, I don't think there's any tram plans at the minute, is there?
No, I mean, there has been a company called Tram Power in Preston who've been sort of off and on over the years trying to get some kind of tram going along an old railway track bed through Ribbleton, between sort of Preston and Ribbleton and Red Scar. But I think that it's still bubbling away in the background. But certainly, as far as I'm aware, that's it, and there's no plans for it to go to Chorley or anywhere else. It's still, I think, unlikely to happen in the Preston area, let alone anywhere else. So, as I understand it.
Go over a quick comment.
Yeah. Only I just thought, it might be happening because you've got to do tram services in cities like Sheffield, haven't you?
Yeah, and I've just come from that area and had a lot of involvement. A colleague ran the tram business, the Stagecoach Super Tram, but I'd have a lot of involvement in that business and know quite a lot about it. And tram's a real challenge. Tram networks generally are not viable without subsidy in some form. So the Sheffield Super Tram, the revenue does not cover the operating costs. The fares do not cover the costs of running it. And indeed, Manchester Metrolink, similar. Manchester Metrolink needs a subsidy to operate. So there is a real challenge in some of this heavy rail type infrastructure. It is good though. It is really good, and it can generate modal shift. But we need government support for tram networks.
Yeah, thanks, Matt.
Thank you. We've got Mark Clifford next.
Yeah, thank you. Matt, you've mentioned the gold specification of buses. Now, I will stick on my environmental role here. I seem to remember when they first came out, as part of the advertising on the bus, it said a low emission engine or a cleaner. Now, I seem to remember, I'm thinking about Euro 5 and Euro 6. You've said you'll be changing the engines to Euro 6.
Yeah.
But actually, some of these buses are fairly new. Did they come with a Euro 6 engine and you've had to convert them back to Euro 5? Because I did hear from some bus users there was a lot of unreliability. Is that why you're using Euro 5 engines in them?
I don't believe that's the case. No, Euro 6 buses basically became standard in about 2014, 2015. So every vehicle we've bought since, and the rest of the bus industry, has been Euro 6. My understanding is they were purchased in about 2015, and they were probably about the last Euro 5s to be built. Is that right, James?
It is, yes. That those vehicles were some of the last Euro 5 because of the chassis and the engine type that they used for quite intensive work on the 125, whereas Euro 6 was generally only coming in on some of the buses that had smaller engines for more local use. So obviously since then they've all become Euro 6. So yeah, they were delivered Euro 5 new. So
they'll be about the last. I mean, don't get too technical. The Scania buses, the heavyweight buses, and the Euro 5, we bought the ADL version, they would have probably got Euro 6 at that point, but we will be upgrading them. Euro 5's not a lot worse than Euro 6, but Euro 6 is the best. And what's interesting, if you go back a few years, we literally went Euro 2, Euro 3, Euro 4, Euro 5 very fast. Euro 6 has been in for 5 years now, and there's not likely to be anything that exceeds it in the near future.
Thank you.
No, they've peaked, really. We've reached the best emissions we can get off a bus without going to zero.
Yeah. Thanks.
Okay.
Yeah. Any other questions or comments? No. I did have a quick. I've got a quick one. The social isolation wise, do you still do the £1 offer for young people to the youth zone? Because obviously that was a big thing for people in Adlington, particularly for young people, and obviously help with social isolation because they're out on the border of Chorley. Do you still do that?
Yes, we do. Yeah.
Right, brilliant. You should have put it in your presentation. It would have pleased you.
I should actually. Point.
I told you we could talk all day. So shall I hand on to Nick?
That's great.
Then? Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
Right, and then we can take any more questions at the end. So I'm going to hand to Nick, and Nick can tell me when he wants me to move the slides. So Nick is our, do you want to introduce yourself, Nick? Head of Built Environments, is that right?
Yeah, that's right. So I have a unique role in Stagecoach, and frankly, an almost unique role in the bus industry. It's my job to support stakeholders in the development sector to create policies, plans, strategies, and projects that allow bus and coach to play the fullest possible role that it can. And most of my time is actually spent with either local planning authorities like yourselves. My role is actually focused. I can't equally cover the whole of the country. I'm actually mainly employed in the south of the country. However, I have a lot of background in this particular part of the world, going back, as you'll hear, to my childhood. I've actually went as a young man of 16 to Curden Hall and picked up my copy of the Central Lancashire New Town Plan just before they wound it up, which dates me somewhat. And that document is still very treasured on the bookshelf, which you can't see just off to the side. So I have, had a great deal of interest in transport generally, and in the development of the, Chorley as part of the Central Lancashire New Town, and subsequently in my professional life as well as my personal life, which I hope makes this a bit more of a relevant conversation than it might otherwise be. The area where you as a council have, ultimate control is over your local plan strategy. And that's why, we really want to urge you to think about what you can do and your officers can do to start on a very, very difficult journey, and it is going to be challenging, to, if you like, restructure your built environment to make not just bus, but all sustainable modes much more relevant as a choice. And the difficulty is that that's a very long-term process. As you're well aware, your local plan has a 15-year horizon from adoption, which means that at the time you start a local plan review, you're typically having to look, 18 to 20 years ahead. And and the development that you planned for will take, you know, that kind of time to be built out. And interestingly, when you look at the planning history of Chorley Borough, it is amazing how much of the current structure of the town and the existing Central Lancashire core strategy reflects the basic shape of decisions that were made in the 1973 new town plan. It's not unusual with new towns or former new towns like Central Lancashire. You see this in places like Northampton, Warrington. There's this incredible legacy effect, particularly where there were kind of grand plans for expansion in the 70s and 80s. What that did, unfortunately, is create an urban structure, not just in Chorley, but beyond in Leyland and South Ribble and so on, that was intentionally designed to accommodate growing car use. The vision was for the car. The grand visions for expressways across Central Lancashire were very much about making, you know, assuming that car was going to be the natural choice. Now, of course, we're living in a world where the government is expecting sustainable modes to be the natural choice, but all of the vast majority of the infrastructural investment since 1973 in Chorley Borough has frankly been in roads. Yeah. And it's interesting as well, we talked about the Central Lancashire Transport and Highways Master Plan, which in fact essentially set out to complete the roads from the Central Lancashire New Town Plan of 1973 that hadn't actually been built or fully built. So again, mostly in South Ribble and Preston, I grant you, and very much recognise what yourselves are saying about how little focus there is in that document on Chorley, which I think frustrates us as a business as much as it does you, quite frankly. So if you look then at Chorley and the structure of the city, of the town, you'll be well aware of the peripheral distributor road, as it was then called, that was been built in sections. It's taken years to do it. Starting off around the Astley Village area, and then curving round behind, delivered to the west of Chorley, as you know, not so very long ago, the Yarrow Valley Way that was delivered to release the land at Gillibrands. And then, of course, the last section was the southern section linking up on the south of the town that was only opened relatively recently. But a lot of the housing growth, in fact, the majority of the housing growth looks out to those roads. So that, as you know, that the movement corridors are around the edge of the new housing. They don't go through the new housing at all. There's sometimes loops like Astley Village, which was one of the earlier new town neighbourhoods, as many of you will be very well aware. But even now, we've got situations, for example, at Lower Burg, where we have this massive cul-de-sac that's still under construction, land that was originally earmarked in the Central Lancashire New Town Plan. It's been sat there waiting as safeguarded land since 1973. And I believe that there was a New Towns Act consent on most of Lower Burg that dates back to the mid-1980s, that it's taken this long, for the housing to ultimately come forward. So there's a very, very, very long history why we are where we are. But the situation we're in makes it almost impossible, as Matt and James had explained, to create relevant, efficient bus routes that get to where people want to go quickly, and certainly provide a competitive choice with a car. So if you live, for example, and you'll know this very well, folks, I'm sure that are local to the area, it is quicker to walk or cycle from Astley Village into the centre of Chorley than to have got on a bus that takes the long way round and that had to go west, to go east and come back round on itself, whichever way you wanted to go. Similarly, we got the problem in Lower Burg, where it's a massive cul-de-sac, but the cul-de-sac itself doesn't have enough houses on it to generate enough demand for us to warrant putting a bus through there that's going to give a frequency that people are going to be interested in. So all of these problems really do stem to a great extent from the legacy of a planning strategy that is 30, 40 years old. and a different world. You get what you plan for. If you plan for cars, you'll get lots of cars, and that is exactly what the new town did. And that is really the main reason why your bus mode share of people taking buses for their journeys in Chorley is, we have to admit, that the evidence is very clear from the census, one of the lowest in the UK, because people are generally driving. So if we could just go to the next one. Yeah. So that's the past.
Nick, it's fair to say though, this is not this isn't just Chorley, this is across the UK, this kind of situation.
I would say it's worse in central Lancashire. It is particularly bad. Yeah. What we didn't have in the central Lancs new town is any real vision for bus. In many of the other new towns, even dare I say in Warrington to a greater extent, which is quite a statement, given the traffic problems they've got today, there seemed to be more of a vision for bus, partly because the local authority had its own bus company at the time. But if you look, for example, at Runcorn with its busways, that was planned only about 6 or 7 years before central Lancashire. But there was a principled decision taken that they were going to design the whole town around dedicated fast bus spines. And as a result, the bus service in Runcorn, even to this day, much of Runcorn is very, very good. It's efficient, it's frequent, it's fast. People use it, not just to get around Runcorn, but it then goes on to Liverpool and Widnes and all of these other places. So what we've then had is the sort of flow through from those planning decisions and strategies. But we've also had the strategy of the last 20 years, which understandably, in many ways, rightly prioritised previously developed land. And that meant that the Royal Ordnance Factory at Buckshaw was brought forward. And that was a bit of a windfall, really, because it meant that it didn't require precious greenfields to be built on, as you're no doubt very well aware. But the problem is that when you're dealing with previously developed land, it is where it is. And as you all know, the location of Buckshaw was deliberately designed to be isolated. It was a bomb factory. It needed to be distant from houses and an existing industry because of the nature of the activity. Big site in the middle of nowhere, cut off by the railway lines, and an awful lot again of the urban structure, even for Buckshaw, despite it being previously developed, left us with similar sorts of problems than we had when we were dealing with the new town development that was planned in the 70s and 80s. So we have found that very hard to serve. The way in which, we'll talk about urban design in a minute, the urban design, again, the bus is going around the edge, as folk will be very well aware. We don't have a single simple route that goes through the middle with all the houses either side. We've got the central avenue, which is right on the edge and segregated from the houses, and then quite a wobbly loop road, very, very tricky to get buses through, really not very, very helpful to us. And I think the other thing I really want to emphasize is, as Matt said, we need a lot of revenue to make a new bus service work. That means actually we need critical mass of housing, a lot more housing than typically people realize is needed to justify even putting one bus extra into our network. We need about 1,500 to 1,600 new houses with a clear route through to even just justify probably one bus in the system. So we've also had some more recent challenges, and I believe you me, I sympathise with your planning committee, where development has come forward piecemeal. Clayton Le Woods, nightmare. Absolute nightmare. As many of you will be aware, the land at Clayton Le Woods was safeguarded since the 1970s for long-term development. It ended up having to be brought forward outside the plan-led system as the current local plan was going through its preparation. As a result, it came forward in bits. There are 3 or 4 main holdings there. The last one to come forward is in the control of Homes England. And how that one comes forward, will the roads connect up to put any kind of bus through? Who knows? We really hope that is the case. But the problem we've also got at Clayton Le Woods is, even if the road does join up, the legacy of how things have happened over the last 10 years means it's a very, very indirect and circuitous route. Difficult to make it an efficient bus route because the bus will just be winding for 10 or 12 minutes through houses, some significant number of houses, but again, not enough to put extra people on without really annoying people who just want to get to their journey along the down to their destination, Bamber Bridge, South Ribble, much more quickly and on a direct route that goes down the Wigan Road and so on. So, yeah, I mean, there are some really, to come back to what really we've been saying, as you look at your local plan, we know, I'm very well aware how constrained you are. There are very few obvious answers that look great, I have to be honest. But if you to start looking at our existing higher frequency corridors and look at suitable sites that are as close as possible, if not actually on those routes, that means that those people living in those new homes will, of course, be able to take advantage of a good service from day one. And that is essential. One of the problems we've had at Bookshaw is that we were actually only allowed to go through Bookshaw, very, round the back of Bookshaw down, was it Warden Avenue? Bookshaw Avenue and Warden Avenue up to the east there, around that loop, very, very late in the development program. There was something like 1,800 houses complete before we could actually get in there. And by then, everybody's got loads of cars. They can't wait years before we can get a service nearer to their front door. So the phasing of development and decent bus routes is also really critical. If you're going to build a new road for a new bus service or a diverted bus service, it needs to be available suitably early. So, yeah, absolutely hear what you say about rail services, particularly you've got an existing rail station. I would caution you, I work nationally. So many local plans have assumed new railway lines or new railway stations, and they haven't happened. And a new railway station costs between 13 and 20 million. And then you've got to persuade the train company they want to slow their train down and stop there. Very, very difficult. Whereas if we've got the right local plan, we've got the right local plan strategy and the right urban design, we can hopefully be in there a lot quicker than that without anything like that kind of money needing to be spent. So things that we'd really like to encourage yourselves as you're looking at the local plan with neighbouring authorities, it's one thing to just round out your built up area and fill in a few gaps at the edge. But if those gaps at the edge are a long, long way away from any existing bus route, it's virtually impossible to conceive there'll be any bus going through there in the future. There are some potential ways you could kind of create a bit of critical mass, but you need a lot more houses, and typically those kind of rounding out opportunities on the edge of the built up area are too far away and not big enough to do that. We've got a really interesting example of this at Whittle Woods, where we know that yourselves as a council have suggested that the safeguarded land heading up alongside the M61 there on the east side of Whittle Woods might be a good place to look to allocate. And the problem is that we couldn't really justify, or we doubt we could justify, running a bus up the old the Chorley Old Road. We just end up robbing, so the people already on the service to put the new folk on. The existing residents up there, it's quite affluent, much of it, where Redrow have built and so on. There's very little affordable housing. So as soon as you take a bus up there to serve a few hundred new ones, you just end up, frankly, losing more passengers on the current route that are using it than you'll gain on a diversion. Cowling Farm, Councillor Mark Clifford, is it worth taking that question now, folks?
Yeah, Mark, do you want to
come in? Yep, thank you, Kim. Nick, there actually is a bus route, the 114, that does run along Chorley Old Road. Yeah. Now, obviously, it's not a stagecoach route, but one of the concerns is future development, where there's some potential plans that they've not been submitted yet.
No, I understand.
Would affect Town Lane. Now, you're mentioning all this in the local plan. Now, I don't sit on the planning committee, which as champion of environment, it would silence me. So that's why I don't sit on that committee. But what effects do you have as an input into the local plan as Stagecoach? And when it comes to some of these planning applications, which, as you've said, are unsuitable, they're too far away, as you've mentioned, Whitley Woods distance from the 125. As an organisation yourselves, are you putting the comments in at these planning applications? Are you being consulted?
Right, very good question that I was going to come to at the end, but you've anticipated me. The answer is where we have the resource and the business to do so, we do. I do monitor the most important and the biggest and most critical ones. And as a courtesy, let my colleagues, Matt and so on, know, and they probably get bothered late at night on a Saturday, because that's when I tend to do it, because it's in my own time, a lot of it. We do put representations in where we see there being a critical issue. What we try to avoid doing is putting our oar in when actually we can see in the round that there are a whole bunch of other things steering this, and in reality, how do I put this? You know, we need to fight the fights where it really makes the most impact, and it's going to make the most impact on the public positively. We are already engaging with the Central Lancs Local Plan Review. In fact, I'm doing some work now. I've just created a paper, or writing a paper with my colleagues to submit to the Senior Responsible Officer to sort of flesh out some of the ideas we're coming up with today. But on a short-term basis, if as an authority, we're not a statutory consultee. So we're not like Highways England or even the Ramblers. The Ramblers are a statutory consultee, it seems, in many places. So we don't get told. We have to find out what's going on. If your development management team were in a position to just fire across or make sure on the bigger applications that you know, our commercial director was made aware of them when they come in, then it would make it so much easier to look at it, and if we need to make comments, because we just simply don't have enough staff and time to proactively monitor everything across the whole of England. It's a hell of a job. I am also doing work nationally to try and help get guidance out to planning authorities, to developers, to consultants, transport planners. We've published a book. It's only 32 pages long. It's called Bus Services and New Residential Developments. It kind of does what it says on the tin. I call it the Big Blue Book because it's big, it's blue, and it's a book. It's on the Stagecoach website, and we can circulate the link to that if you're interested, which is kind of urban design guidance, which, you know, what you know, what's good practice, what's helpful, what isn't. And we're going to touch a little bit on that on the next slide or two, because I'm conscious we're getting to 8 o'clock and folk are going to need to leave and everything. So we really want, so we are trying to shape this, and we conscious as well, Mark and colleagues, we need to get in early. What we've failed to do, I have to hold our hands up, we've tended to react. So it's great that we're at this stage, as you're looking at the early stages of the local plan. If we can put our input in now and help steer the sort of thinking so that people know what the art of the possible is, to get that vision for bus that we've talked about that there wasn't in the past, then we've got much more of a chance of planning for bus and getting the best possible results, whatever that looks like. So yeah, we recognise that we need to be involved, and in fact government is expecting, through the National Planning Policy Framework, there is now language in NPPF that makes it clear that not only should we be drawn in to the process, but we actually need to kind of we need to get stuck in. Yeah. So we are going to try and do that more than we have done, I think it's fair to say, in the past. Yeah. Does that help?
Yep. Thank you.
Yeah.
Alison's got a hand. Alison's the local plan officer, aren't you, Alison? Oh, I think you might be on mute. I think you're on mute. Oh.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. Yes, I mean, we're encouraging non-stakeholders and statutory stakeholders to come in and talk to us about the emerging local plan, and we appreciate Stagecoach's involvement. And we will look at all the issues and try and look at how we develop sites. Obviously, it's quite complicated to develop sites, and we have tried to phase sites and have a phasing program. And unfortunately, at the last local plan, the inspector examining the plan decided she didn't want phasing, so we weren't able to phase, and we have tried to bring land through applications for development. But going forward, we are very keen, and it's a necessity that we try and bring forward services and infrastructure before the development.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. We get that. And we also, Alison, be assured, we understand the difficulty, the very difficult balances, you know, that you're having to make, technical balances, viability issues, not just on buses, but viability issues on development. We're very well aware of the pressures in terms of creating a 5-year supply. So when we do get involved, we try and do so in quite a nuanced way, having regard to the bigger picture. So I hope as you do work with us, you'll discover that we solve more problems than create them. Because, you know, I am a specialist, and I as I say, I'm acknowledged as being a bit of a player in the area, so it does help. So looking at what you can do as a planning authority, if we can direct the houses to the bus routes rather than just assume that the buses will come to the houses, I think we've proved in Chorley and this area that's not a great assumption. Avoiding dead-end development is really great. It's really important. So putting things on the main roads where there is through service is actually really, really important as a principle. If it can be done, it may not be possible to put all or even most development on our existing main routes like the 125. And I think it's fair to say, even if you were to do that, the opportunities for that are limited in Chorley. It has to be said. So then you're really looking as well at what does a rational form of development of the urban structure look like that puts as many existing and new residents on a logical, direct corridor that has enough traffic potential on it that we can start to look with some 106 pump priming money to build that up. So it isn't just the new residents that are going to use it more. This is a really important point. The key is actually going to be to get existing residents to use bus more, to create the conditions where we're running more frequently. It creates that virtuous spiral, of extra buses, therefore more people get on them, therefore, more people get on them, we can put more buses on. And there's some really interesting case studies. The one that I'd actually, interestingly, for your town look and your borough look at is Crawley, believe it or not, in West Sussex, which had a dying town network 15 years ago, but because of comprehensive bus priority, has a thriving bus network, and where the bus mode share in 15 years, I think, has trebled. Again, in a former new town, although one where, it's not clearly, there's a lot of differences between Crawley and Chorley, but there's also some significant pointers there that prove that it's not a complete counsel of despair. What I would definitely warn you away from is new settlements, I'll be honest, in the middle of nowhere. Often those sites are easier because they're big sites, greenfield sites that are big but relatively remote, not that constrained by ecology, not that constrained by topography. Sometimes they're popular because they're not that near existing residents. So the political pressure can be lower in the round. But the trouble is that whether it's sewage, power, water, or bus routes, they are extremely expensive to develop. And whilst you can make the power and the water work with a lot of money, the bus routes, the cost of sustaining them rarely is justified by the amount of likely demand. We are really having to fight vigorously against remote new settlements. Yes, new settlements can be very, very good if they're on a high quality public transport corridor, maybe built around a railway station, and to a degree Buckshaw's got that benefit. But we have to be realistic about what we can do with buses when suddenly we've got even 2,000 or 3,000 houses in the middle of nowhere. Even that's not going to be enough to justify a decent bus service that people will use. And I know that's sort of counterintuitive. You'd have thought, well, 2,000 houses, Nick, surely that will be enough. But again, as we've seen with Buckshaw, we've got a half-hourly service, which is, it's okay, but it's hardly going to get people out of their cars, let's be honest. And as you know, Buckshaw is well over 2,000 units. So it shows you just how serious some of these constraints and issues are. So if we can have the last slide, the next couple of slides, it's a bit less wordy. I think we come into a little bit more. So master planning. We've got my big blue book, which I mentioned. We've also got 2 other documents. There's something called the Transport for New Homes Development Checklist. That was published last year by a pressure group, and it's actually very good. It's a little bit idealistic, but it certainly, gives you some of the key issues and sets some interesting thresholds. I'll have to be honest with you, in Chorley, it's unlikely that many sites would reach any of the thresholds, but it certainly tells you what to look for. You might have to sort of adjust the actual value of the threshold. The Chartered Institute of Highways and Transportation has also published its own guidance for professionals and planners and planning authorities as well as developers. And that's 2018, called Buses and Urban Developments. It's mainly aimed at big cities though, but there's some very, very good practice in there, some good advice. And the other thing to be aware of is there's a national manual for streets to be coming out soon. And that's going to, we hope, deal with some of the problems we've had with detailed design of streets and roads within development, because we've had some serious problems. Group 1 in Buckshaw, I don't know how many of you are very familiar with it. The road's been open for a little while now. There is a planned bus gate on it, but it's just too tortuous. It's just too windy, too narrow, too many parked cars, and not, again, there's about 1,200 houses. I think my records say 1219 dwellings committed there. But, you know, I said we needed 1,500 minimum just to justify one bus. And it's offline of everything. Again, you know, it was previously developed land and all the rest of it, but it's very, very difficult to make bus work in that development. And I struggle to see that it will have anything other than a county supported bus route going forward, but there we go. So when we come talk about phasing, Alison touched on this. I'm not so much talking about phasing of land. I'm talking about on a really big site. It's about conditioning the point where a spine road is opened. Yeah. And even when you do that rightly, we're well aware that developers wriggle out of it, or they frankly breach their own condition. Yeah. We've seen that many times before, and it needs a bold planning authority to be prepared to take action, firstly to set an appropriate agreed date or development threshold. You know, by the 500th occupation, this road shall have been completed and open to traffic. Reason for condition: in the interests of sustainable development and ensuring, you know, that a safe and efficient, you know, circulation is provided for sustainable modes. Yeah, in accordance with policy, whatever. Yeah, and National Planning Policy. Paragraph 102, 103, and 108. So we had this problem with Worden Avenue in Buckshaw, that the development was built pretty much complete actually, but we didn't get Worden Avenue until very late in the day, and that really did put a hole in the 109A when we ran it. Next slide, we're nearly there. People have been very, very, I'm very impressed with your attention. So when you're designing streets on new development, and this obviously isn't in Lancashire, but you know, this is not bad. This is actually where I live, believe it or not. When I took the photograph, I didn't even live in the town, so it was so good I chose to live here. So we've got, you know, quite dense development, as you can see. It's sort of Georgian style. In fact, some of the styles of houses look a little bit like the village centre of Buckshaw. Yeah. Nice street trees for shading. You know, verges. There's actually what we call a SUD system, sustainable urban drainage system, behind the curb line. You can just see the corner of a bus stop on the far right. Sadly, I didn't get that in, but you can see that there's actually no parking on that street, and it gently sweeps away around the corner. It's got enough curves to slow the traffic down, but it's not too curvy to slow the buses down to a point where they really can't get through. So this is a really good example of what can be done. That development is now, this street has been in place now for about 8 years. So similar sort of vintage to Buckshaw. What we don't want, obviously, if you just flick to the next slide. Thanks, Matt.
Just trying to.
There's a brief technical delay.
Yeah, there we go. Sorry.
And this is in the same town, believe it or not, a development of a similar scale built at the same time, where it's just what I would call carnage. And here we have our bus customers, and the driver actually had to slightly reverse off that stop, but he wanted to be able to get the buggy on. And it's everything we don't want. Yeah. Can you also see that bus stop is right outside somebody's, pretty much their front door? It's by their garden wall, but can you see how close the habitable windows and the porch are to this bus route? We really do recommend, for all sorts of reasons, that there's a bit more space given, just for residents, just for practical reasons, really. Lots of detail like that in my guidance. I'm not going to you know, by all means, you know, we'll make sure you can view that and see that, and obviously your own officers and Lancashire County Council actually already have that at Lancashire, although we're not always that impressed with how much notice people take of it, but we look forward to more notice being taken of it. So collaborating, terrific. We're talking tonight. We're talking to one of the, you know, your officer and the senior responsible officer for the local plan, the joint plan. We are putting material as we speak, as I said, into input into the site screening process. We know that some sites are going to be more difficult than others for bus, but at least you'll know what the sort of good, bad, and frankly ugly are, and hopefully the worst sites will be ones you can take a view on, and the best sites you'll also be able to take a view on. Absolutely ready to help shape, absolutely ready to help your officers and the Lancashire County Council officers to come up with that. The best possible plan and the best possible proposals as well as the planning applications come in. So I'll leave it there. Hope I didn't go on too long, and hope that gave you some helpful pointers and maybe a little bit of hope that there might be some more positive things we can do collaboratively going forward.
Thank you. That was really interesting.
Just to finish, I won't read all this unless you want us to, but I think the key message is the current network is largely commercial, and a lot of the things you'd like to see are not viable commercially, and together we need to work to get more funding into public transport. And it'd be very easy for you to say, well, we need control, we need the network ourselves. We genuinely believe a partnership is the way to do that, so we need more funding collectively, and then we in the partnership with yourselves make commitments as to investment, to network levels, service levels, maybe fares. And we see that as the future, but we need quite a lot more money to make the bus a more attractive proposition, really. And post COVID-19, there's a real challenge because we've lost some of our patronage, possibly for good. And all that's happened is we've lost what we might have lost over the next 5 years has suddenly been accelerated because of the changes in society are going fast. And you can read the rest of that probably for yourself, but we've got a great town centre in Charlie, a great bus interchange. There's some good work going on with development, so we need to make that bus friendly, and we need to work together really to get greater funding for the bus. So that's probably enough, I think, because we were meant to finish at 7 o'clock.
Can I just make one simple point as well? You've already got a bus vision and a bus strategy, and that Central Lancashire Highways and Transportation Master Plan that largely has not been implemented. The roads have been built or are being built. Flensburg Way in South Ribble being dualled and all the rest of it. Yeah. Where are those bus corridors? Those bus priority corridors? Where, again, I don't live locally, I'm afraid, like my colleagues do, but I don't think there's been a lot of work done on that. If you could, as officers and members of Chorley Borough Council, if you could, with your colleagues at South Ribble, really push hard on that, because if we were to get those projects designed and built, yeah, it would make a big difference. It would make a big difference, particularly on our core routes that allow us to really build those back up to the highest possible level quickly, make it more attractive against the car, send all the right messages. You know, there's already a platform to build on in policy. It just needs people, honestly, at the county to do it.
Fab, no, thank you. Julia, have you got a question? You had a hand up.
You're muted. Oh.
Sorry, I got disconnected myself then. I just not a question, just as much as a comment that we've had some cracking presentations tonight, and I really, really do respect you sticking with us tonight and kicking back so hard, particularly around the planning. And the thing is, I think it just motivates us as councillors and on district level and also on a county level to go and cause some good trouble to ensure that we do have these partnerships. It's absolutely imperative. So well done. And thank you for tremendous presentations tonight. Thank you.
I really appreciate that. That's really good.
Just the one comment when you go and kick back, and I really appreciate that. Please genuinely believe us that if we felt that diverting a bus or doing something different with it if it was going to have some viability, it was worth a try, we would do it. It's our years of experience of running buses and trying some of these things that we rely on, but we will try it if we believe it's going to be viable. We will.
Thank you. Any further comments of anybody? Or no, I think some of the more prolific people have left the meeting.
Apologies that James on our team, he's had to leave to collect his daughter. He wasn't aware that it'd go on to this time, so sorry about that.
No, thank you very much for coming. I think, I think we've all learnt a lot, and we can certainly, you've probably given us definitely given us some ideas for recommendations for our task group and the report that we'll be doing after Christmas and just after the new year and so on. So no, that's it. So thank you, and you're welcome to stay for the last bit, or you can or leave.
I'll leave you. But what I would just say, James and I, very happy to have any sessions with you anytime. If you just wanted a session of councillors to ask questions, we'll come and do that. And we can allocate time. So we're always here to work with you, make ourselves available. And James particularly, sorry he's not here now, he knows Charlie very well. He's one of your residents who lives in the town, so he knows every bit of it and understands the issues. I'm still learning it, having recently joined this patch, but we'll come back anytime you want us.
Oh no, definitely, and I've emailed James about stuff previously in Adlington, so yeah, could pay testament to that. So definitely, no, that's great. And Matthew's got all your contact details, hasn't he? Yeah, fab. No, thank you very much again. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Okay.
See you. Bye.
Bye bye.
Right, so we'll move on to item 5. Are we happy to note the report, or is there any comments anybody wants to make, or happy to note it? Yeah. Well, we'll go on to item 5. So date of the next meeting is Thursday the 7th of January 2021, so that'll be in the new year. And I don't think we've got any other business. I'm not aware of any urgent items, so we'll declare the meeting closed. If ICT could stop recording, that would be great. And thank you everybody for coming.
Thank you, Chair.
Thanks.
Thank you.